Togashi has a varied history when it comes to his take on the tournament arc formula, a change in attitude that shows many sides on how to keep the staple of the shonen demographic relevant, as well as his own thoughts on the concept. Before going into them, it's worth addressing the reasons an author can feel the need to add a tournament arc when they've become a saturated formula within shonen manga that dates back to at least the 70s, and there have been plenty of tournament arcs in films and television outside of this medium. A tournament's main use in many is as an opportunity to efficiently introduce characters and establish their motivation centered around whatever the prize may be, who might be more difficult to bring into the fold under another scenario without pacing issues. Dependent on the tournament type, it can also serve as a way to have allies face off against each other in a friendly match, or present great teamwork of a team event. On top of that, it can offer opportunities to have the protagonist lose that life or death battles can't provide, but this being a major reason for one is a sign of weakness in writing, when there are many more options to have the protagonist defeated but stay alive. With a good tournament though, it's important to have every fight be relevant to either the plot or major characters involved. A one-sided fight can offer a lot in terms of fleshing out, reflecting, or growing a character, in or outside the ring. A fight only there to show off a character or offer more to their win-loss record can end up being padding if lasting too long. A pitfall to tournament arcs though is that their narrative may make the arc itself seem like an overly elaborate build-up to it, if a lot of battles before it act as no more than a roadblock to the conflict, which offer many ways to make a tournament arc feel distinctive working around this, by either having the antagonists' battles feel as relevant to their growth as the protagonists, or not making the who or when for the protagonist's climactic conflict too obvious. A good example of the former would be the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai, where each of Ten Shinhan's 3 major battles served to bring him further away from Surusenin's indoctrination and give more acceptance to Muten Roshi's words, or Warsman's matches in Kinnikuman's 21st Georgian Olympics, gradually having his emotions peer through his cold visage, whereas a good case of the latter idea is the zenith of Finn's tournament from Battle Angel Alita Last Order, where so much attention is given to fleshing out each of the teams that it wouldn't feel out of place if a team other than Alita's were allowed to win. A poor example of both would be the Tournament of Power in Dragon Ball Super, where despite its battle royale structure, it just amounting to Universe 7 versus Jiren, with everything else being so interchangeable some core battles are entirely different between the anime and manga, make it something even current base Gohan wouldn't need glasses to see as a betrayal of the premise. It can also be difficult to make the tournament feel like it has any stakes if the protagonist loses, even though fatality rule is given, with good tournaments either being high stakes enough that fatalities seem possible, such as nearly every tournament in Kinnikuman, make the aftermath of defeat be greater, such as the Corrida Coliseum in One Piece's Dressrosa arc, having the Mera Mera no Mi act as an understandable MacGuffin for both Luffy and the audience to not want to fall into the wrong hands, or making the character's goals impossible for the foreseeable future, such as the Galaxian Wars in Saint Seiya, making it impossible for Seiya to find his sister if he were to lose, or even the surprising reversal of this with Dragon Ball's 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, where Goku's victory would be something the audience would be hesitant to see with the lessons Muten Roshi wished to impart. Without further preface, let's get into Togashi's history with tournaments, as presented in both Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter. Yu Yu Hakusho's first use of a tournament is in Genkai's attempt to determine the successor. It's through the preliminary tasks, not directly tied to fighting, that we see Togashi wanting to do more than a series of fights. But for those that read earlier Jump manga, such as Kinnikuman, this alone was far from revolutionary, and the main thing to have it stray from the bare basics of the formula is the global stakes at at play if Randor were to win, as well as the mystery of his identity, the former of which is something those that stick to treating a tournament as no more than a sporting event can't usually do in terms of emphasized stakes, but still nothing new when the Dream Tag tournament arc of Kinnikuman, or the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai from Dragon Ball, already existed. It's with the Ankoku Bujusukai, or Dark Tournament, that Togashi cranks up the sense of stakes from the outset, through Togoro's threat, and then Sakyo's goal if Toguro were to win. At the same time though, it makes the Urameshi team's goals within the arc very reactionary at the start, with it taking a while after setting up the premise for Togashi to find goals for the main cast to work through beyond the simple one of defeating Toguro and surviving, such as Kurama desiring to regain the power he had as a Yoko, or Yusuke coming to respect Togoro's strength while also avoiding walking down the same path. Although quite a few of the fights allow for good characterization of the main cast or offering sympathetic light to their opponent's goals, the bloated nature of the arc makes the ratio of relevant fights to padding 50-50 at best, with the streamlining of the Netflix series highlighting this even further. An issue with sticking to the typical tournament structure for this is that not only is it extremely obvious the tournament would boil down to the Urameshi team versus Toguro team, but Togoro's battles are near enough an afterthought, with the only one providing any relevance to the characters involved being Karasu's display helping Kurama prepare for facing him. Even from the start, there's no sugarcoating how above the rest of the competition the Toguro team are, to the point even the more standout fights before the finals seem just an elaborate way of preparing Yusuke for it, especially when the main factors to give the Urameshi team a fighting chance were from outside their tournament matches. Though the idea of 5-on-5 team tournaments wasn't an innovation for the formula due to Kinnikuman's scramble for the throne, each team deciding on the rules for the battle to avoid matches getting monotonous was something few shonen tournaments had done at that point outside of environmental factors. That also showed Togashi's desire for tweaking the tournament formula. Despite that, the Dark Tournament was otherwise quite by the books for shonen tournaments in its structure, with a few character moments being what keeps it above the average. The other major tournament in Yu Yu Hakusho is the Makai Unification Tournament in the Three Kins arc. Though there was a lot of wasted potential from reducing the three-party power struggle with ripe potential for alliance betrayals and major twists if taking a page out of the romance of the Three Kingdoms, there was still some potential behind the idea that was fitting with Yusuke's character. Each match wearing down the fighters meant it didn't have to boil down to Yomi or Mukuro being in the finals, or Yusuke needing to become strong enough to fight them. This is something done well in premise, with the typical Yusuke versus Yomi conflict being in the third round, and Yusuke only managing to soften up Yomi for Koko to beat him, with the winner being outside of either of the most likely bets. The problem with this is the rushed execution, as the appeal to shift it away from the typical expectations is only info dumped after Yusuke's fight, which was barely much of a fight in the manga. An expectation needed for this to work is caring about the characters involved, which is swept to the side with the character-driven fights treated as highlights of this point, such as Hiei allowing Mukuro to overcome her hatred, Kurama's struggle of identity against Shigure, and Yusuke finding balance between his human and yokai natures against Yomi, all being exclusive to the anime, with Togashi either info dumping or not bothering with them, while many other contestants like Raizen's friends aren't fleshed out enough to care about their victories beyond, well, at least Yomi didn't succeed. Overall, it was a fine idea that was ruined by Togashi's burnout, and probably serves to show why his philosophy on tournaments changed entirely after that. Moving on to Hunter x Hunter. The Hunter exam has Togashi both add something new to the tournament formula, along with avoiding the pitfalls his previous attempts had. All the main characters involved are very proactive in their goals that a Hunter license would aid in, as each stage causes characters such as Kurapika or Leorio and Killua to gradually change or open up respectively. Each stage also provides variety that that test more than just the character's martial skill or physical aptitude, such as Leorio vs Lerute being a series of mind games. Though competitions outside of battle had already been a thing in Kinnikuman's Chojin Olympics, the Hunter exam executes this idea better than perhaps any other in terms of sheer variety and ties to characterization. Another standout is Gon's conflict with Hisoka, that, if going by the formula of the Dark Tournament would be the built-up final battle, is not and doesn't cop out on the obvious difference in power and ability, with the tag stealing being a case of patience and opportunism. This desire to shift the status quo of tournaments is most blatant in the final stage, where the brackets flip the tournament structure on its head entirely, with the losers moving up the brackets, which makes the decision to tell of the other events after the protagonist's fight far more justified than in the Three Kins arc. Despite its many stages, it is very concise, with each segment, character, or trial adding to the plot, characterization, insight into the world, or foreshadowing for later arcs. The closest it comes to padding would be Menshi's initial test, and even that was the best way to naturally bring Netero into the arc. Then there's Heaven's Arena, which, while not as all-encompassing on tournament arc strong points due to its primary role being training and setting up the foundations of Nen, does present unique aspects to tournament-esque environments. Battles drawing more on the ideas of scheduled prize fights and multiple floor tiers offers the feeling of rank progression tournaments provide, but without the formulaic bracket, and the point system of fights provide a means for Gon or Killua to do well against more experienced opponents. More on how it reflects Togashi's philosophy though is in Gon and Killua's disappointment at the end goal of Battle Olympia, seeming to be more of a commentary on the burnout the Dark Tournament had given Togashi, on the idea of extreme lengthy tournaments with a typical end goal. Heaven's Arena provided the character-driven goals of a tournament without the predictable structure, shows Togashi having found his style towards creatively weaving a scenario that once had the issues of sticking to a formula. That seems to be the end of Togashi's tournament history. In terms of tournament structure, the election arc can be considered how to implement a shonen tournament structure into a far different scenario and context. The progression through the ranks, a series of rules to abide by, and the multiple candidates to win with varying motivations are all there, but in the context of political grandstanding rather than battles. I have more to say on this arc as a whole another time, but what is relevant to the video is that Togashi's handling of the arc is a case of him seeing the tournament tropes he admires, and apply them to a scenario where the physical confrontation isn't intrinsically connected to the competition. With that, thank you for having watched through this analysis. If wanting to see more Hunter x Hunter analyses, subscribe and check the channel out for more of them and analyses on other manga or fiction in general. With that, I'll see you later.